From mysterious lost tapes to classified lunar experiments, NASA's history is filled with intriguing secrets. Today we'll explore the most compelling mysteries, controversial projects, and untold stories that shaped America's space program. Get ready for some mind-bending revelations. Here's a story that might make you facepalm. NASA somehow managed to misplace the original tapes of humanity's greatest achievement. In 2006, the space agency admitted they couldn't find the high-quality video recordings of the Apollo 11 moon landing. We're not talking about the grainy TV footage you've seen. These were pristine, data-rich tapes recorded directly from the moon's surface. The lost tapes contained about 15 times more detail than what was broadcast to the public. For decades, these invaluable recordings sat in the National Archives until NASA requested them back in the 1970s. Then, in a classic case of governmental whoops, the tapes vanished during a records purge. The leading theory? The tapes were likely erased and reused to save money, a common practice at the time. Talk about an expensive recycling mistake. Now, let's dive into one of NASA's most shocking classified projects from the Cold War era. Project A119. Back in the late 1950s, American scientists seriously considered detonating a nuclear bomb on the moon. Yes, you heard that right. The goal wasn't just scientific research, it was meant to be a massive show of force against the Soviet Union. Picture this: a nuclear explosion visible from Earth, creating a brilliant flash on the lunar surface. The plan called for a small nuclear device to be launched toward the moon's terminator line, the border between light and dark sides. The blast would have created a mushroom cloud in the moon's low gravity, visible through amateur telescopes. Thankfully, cooler heads prevailed, and the project was abandoned due to concerns about public reaction and potential contamination of the moon. Still, it's wild to think how close we came to literally nuking our celestial neighbor. The tragic death of Gus Grissom, one of NASA's original Mercury 7 astronauts, remains a subject of intense debate. On January 27, 1967, during a routine pre-launch test of Apollo 1, a fire erupted in the pure oxygen atmosphere of the command module, claiming the lives of Grissom and his crewmates Ed White and Roger Chaffee. But here's where things get interesting. Before the accident, Grissom had been openly critical of the Apollo program's safety issues. He even hung a lemon on the simulator to express his concerns. His family, particularly his son Scott, has long maintained that the tragedy wasn't a simple accident. They point to strange circumstances, like the disappearance of critical evidence and unusual changes made to the capsule's design. Even more puzzling, Grissom's spacesuit went missing for decades before mysteriously reappearing at a museum. While NASA maintains it was a tragic accident that led to vital safety improvements, questions still linger about what really happened that fateful day. Let's explore some of NASA's most puzzling encounters in space, incidents that even seasoned astronauts can't fully explain. During the Gemini missions, astronauts reported mysterious bogeys following their spacecraft. Even the legendary Buzz Aldrin spotted something unusual on his way to the moon, though NASA later suggested it was likely a panel from their own rocket. The Space Shuttle era brought even more intriguing cases, with multiple crews capturing footage of objects performing seemingly impossible maneuvers. In 1991, the STS-48 mission recorded what appeared to be objects changing direction instantly, defying known physics. While NASA typically offers conventional explanations like ice particles or space debris, some astronauts have gone on record saying there's more to these stories than the public knows. The most compelling evidence comes from the International Space Station's continuous feed, which has captured numerous unexplained phenomena that continue to baffle experts. Here's a darker chapter of NASA's history that often gets glossed over in the history books. After World War II, the US government launched Operation Paperclip, secretly bringing over 1,600 German scientists to America, including Wernher von Braun, the architect of both the V-2 rocket and NASA's Saturn V. These weren't just any scientists. Many were high-ranking Nazi party members who had used slave labor to build their rockets. The US government actually whitewashed their backgrounds, erasing evidence of their Nazi ties from official records. While these scientists were crucial to getting Americans to the moon, their involvement raises serious ethical questions. Von Braun became a celebrity in the US, appearing on Disney TV shows and leading NASA's rocket program, while his dark past remained largely hidden from the public. This morally complex chapter shows how Cold War competitions sometimes overshadowed ethical considerations in the space race. Now let's talk about NASA's expensive missteps that you probably won't find in their highlight reel. Remember the X-33 Venture Star? This sleek, single-stage-to-orbit spacecraft was supposed to replace the space shuttle, with Lockheed Martin promising revolutionary technology. After burning through $1.5 billion and 7 years of development, the project collapsed when its innovative fuel tanks kept failing. Then there's the infamous Constellation program, NASA's ambitious plan to return to the moon by 2020. This $9 billion venture got scrapped after years of technical problems and budget overruns. And let's not forget the nuclear engine for rocket vehicle application, NERVA, a $1.4 billion attempt to create nuclear-powered rockets that ended up producing nothing but expensive paperwork and some radioactive test sites in Nevada. The Viking missions to Mars in 1976 sparked one of NASA's most fascinating controversies. When the Viking landers conducted their life detection experiments, one test actually came back positive for signs of biological activity. Dr. Gilbert Levin, the scientist behind the labeled release experiment, insisted until his death that they had found evidence of life on Mars. But NASA quickly dismissed these results, claiming they were due to unusual soil chemistry. Here's where it gets interesting. The agency never repeated these specific tests in any future Mars missions, despite their provocative results. Some scientists argue that NASA was too quick to reject the findings, possibly because they weren't prepared to deal with the implications of discovering extraterrestrial life. Recent research has shown that Mars's soil contains compounds called perchlorates that could explain both the positive results and support the possibility of microbial life. Let's rewind to the 1960s, when NASA had some seriously ambitious plans for military space stations that never saw the light of day. The Manned Orbiting Laboratory program was basically a spy station in space, disguised as a scientific research platform. Picture this: astronaut soldiers orbiting Earth in a 40-foot laboratory, conducting top-secret reconnaissance missions. The Air Force and NASA poured nearly $1.5 billion into this classified project, even selecting a special team of astronauts. They built launch facilities and modified Gemini spacecraft. But here's the kicker: spy satellites were getting so good that humans in space became unnecessary. In 1969, they quietly cancelled the program, leaving behind half-built hardware and a fascinating what-if in space history. The story shows how closely NASA's civilian space program was intertwined with military objectives during the Cold War. The Challenger disaster wasn't just a tragic accident, it was a catastrophe that many saw coming. In the months leading up to that frigid January morning in 1986, engineers had repeatedly raised red flags about the O-rings in the solid rocket boosters. They knew these rubber seals could fail in cold weather, but their warnings got lost in a maze of bureaucracy and schedule pressure. The night before launch, engineers from Morton Thiokol spent hours arguing against the launch, predicting exactly what would happen. But NASA managers, focused on maintaining their launch schedule and public image, pushed back. When temperatures dropped to 18 degrees of that night, setting the stage for disaster, key decision-makers weren't even informed. The following morning's launch would forever change NASA's culture and remind us that sometimes the most important voices are the ones we choose not to hear. You might think astronauts can freely share all their space experiences, but there's actually a web of strict confidentiality agreements keeping certain stories under wraps. NASA requires all astronauts to sign extensive non-disclosure agreements that can last decades. These contracts cover everything from classified technology to unexplained phenomena encountered during missions. What's particularly interesting is that these agreements don't just protect technical secrets, they also restrict discussions about personal experiences that might compromise national security or cause public concern. Many astronauts have hinted at fascinating stories they're still not allowed to tell. even years after retiring. Some have even admitted to having separate mission logs, one for public record and another containing more sensitive observations. Thanks for joining us on this journey through NASA's most intriguing secrets. We've only scratched the surface of these fascinating stories. If you enjoyed uncovering these space mysteries, hit that like button, subscribe for more hidden history, and share with your curious friends.